Ladies and gentlemen, I request your attention for the recitation of Holy Quran.
أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم تبارك الذي جعل في السماء بروجا وجعل فيها سراجا وقمرا منيرا وهو الذي جعل الليل والنهار خلفة لمن أراد أن يذكر أو أراد شكورا शुरू अल्लाह के नाम से जो बड़ा मेहरबान निहायत रहम करने वाला है। बड़ी शान वाला है वो अल्लाह जिसने आसमान में बुर्ज बनाए और उसमें एक रोशन चराग और नूर वाला चाँद पैदा किया, और वही है जिसने रात और दिन को ऐसा बनाया कि वो एक दूसरे के पीछे चलते आते हैं, मगर ये सारी बातें उस शख्स को फ़ायदा देती हैं जो नसीहत हासिल करने का इरादा रखता हो या शुक्र बजा लाना चाहता हो। सदक़ल्लाहुल अज़ीम।
Ladies and gentlemen, we shall now commence this session. I, Hansa Qureshi, on behalf of President CAS, Air Marshal Farhat Hussain Khan, and CAS team, welcome you all to today's session. Ladies and gentlemen, the Day 2 of Global Strategic Threat and Response Conference's third session is titled Emerging Technologies and Future Warfare. The rapid development and spread of new technologies funded by all the states has created an arms race that is weakening stability and increasing the chances of accidental, out-of-control escalation. Many existing technologies are not yet governed by laws. These technologies can therefore disrupt the existing value system and frameworks that the current international social order and norms depend on. Therefore, this session will focus on technologies and future warfare, impact and options, drones and proliferation of lethal autonomous weapon systems, military applications of AI and cyber, and their impact on strategic stability. This session will be moderated by Air Marshal Retired Ashfaq Arai, who is Advisor to Chief of Air Staff PAF on CAS Affairs. He is also the Director of Emerging Technologies and Global Conferences at CAS. So without further delay, I would invite Air Marshal Ashfaq Arai to take over as the moderator.
Thank you, Hansa. Former Air Chiefs, honorable panelists, excellencies, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, Assalamu alaikum, and a very good morning and a late good evening to our speaker from the US. Ladies and gentlemen, this session about emerging technologies and the future of warfare will actually focus how the technologies are affecting our daily lives, how we are benefiting out of these technologies, and when they are applied in the military, how they can cause devastation and destruction, and how do we find a way forward for that. For this, we are fortunate to have extremely experienced, knowledgeable, and people with authority who will be speaking on today's session, and we hope that from their wisdom we'll learn a lot and we'll be able to find a way forward how these technologies will help us. Today we are fortunate to have Lieutenant General Khalid Ahmad Kidwai as our keynote speaker. Ladies and gentlemen, Lieutenant General Khalid Ahmad Kidwai has led a meritorious military service spanning over 54 years, probably the longest in Pakistan's history. He has held a variety of prestigious command and staff instructional appointments and is a graduate of Pakistan's Command and Staff College, National Defense University, and the US Army Field Artillery School, Fort Sill. After the May 1998 nuclear test, General Kidwai pioneered the establishment of Pakistan's National Command Authority and was appointed as the founding Director General of the Strategic Plans Division in December 1998, where he served for over 15 years, and since 2014 is an advisor to the National Command Authority. As Director General SPD, he conceived, articulated, and executed Pakistan's nuclear policy and deterrence doctrines and translated these doctrines into a robust nuclear force structure, oversaw and ensured the establishment of Army, Navy, and Air Force Strategic Forces Commands, including the development and operationalization of a variety of nuclear weapons. He put in place state-of-the-art command and control systems as well as an effective nuclear security regime for Pakistan's strategic assets. He is also the architect of Pakistan's Civilian Nuclear Energy Vision 2050. Lieutenant General Khalid Kidwai has been awarded Pakistan's highest civil award, the Nishan-e-Imtiaz, the second highest civil award, Hilal-e-Imtiaz, in addition to Hilal-e-Imtiaz military. He will be discussing militarization of emerging technologies, implications on national security. Now I will request General Khalid Kidwai, sir.
Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Ladies and gentlemen, Assalamu alaikum and good morning to all of you. I am grateful to the Center for Aerospace and Security Studies for asking me to deliver the keynote address at the third session of this very important conference on global strategic threat and response. Within that framework, the topic, like the Air Marshal said, of the third session is militarization of emerging technologies and the implications on strategic stability in South Asia specifically. I would like to express my gratitude to Air Marshal Farhat and Air Marshal Ashfaq Rai, the great friends from our days some years ago when we were putting our heads together to work out the nuts and bolts of the Air Force Strategic Command as a critical arm of Pakistan's first strike capability. Air Marshal Ashfaq particularly not only persuaded me to accept this invitation, but also kept me in the loop as the contours of the conference took shape. I would like to start by taking a somewhat philosophical and historical view of the term emerging technologies. The term emerging technologies in recent years has managed to catch the imagination and attention of today's military professionals as something of a new and exotic term of our times. Perhaps because exotic technologies like robotics, artificial intelligence AI, directed energy weapons, hypersonic weapons, cyber warfare, space capabilities, drones, etc., they conjure a vision of a Star Wars-like intergalactic warfare from faraway distances, wherein a faceless adversary can neither be seen nor pinpointed for possible retribution and retaliation. A video game-like environment where an anonymous individual sitting somewhere in Florida playing on his screen can blow up with mind-boggling precision Ayman al-Zawahiri in the balcony of a Kabul apartment. Or a faceless cyberspace hacking operation which can switch off the electricity grid of a mega city, plunging life into chaos and inflicting massive financial losses. The effects generated through some of these technologies include shock and awe, surprise, and destruction, far in excess of conventional technologies as we know them. Force multipliers in many ways, warfare without a name tag. We seem to have latched onto this coinage of emerging technologies with much enthusiasm, awe, and novelty, as if the development and emergence of technologies before our current era had come to a stop, and that it is only of late that technologies have made a breakthrough and started to emerge or re-emerge from hibernation. Philosophically speaking, if we look at technologies in a historical perspective, I would like to submit that for ages past, and for that matter for centuries past, technologies and technological developments in any given era were always dynamic, progressive, and generated profound strategic effects on the strategic stability, instability paradigm in that particular era, time, place, and region. Of course, with each passing decade, or a couple of decades, or even a century, the complexity and lethality of technologies certainly became more and more challenging in each era than in the eras past. But because science and technology are by their very nature progressive, innovative, and a marvel, new technologies did not really stop emerging, ever. Technologies remain in an unstoppable race to ever-expanding frontiers of excellence, innovation, and mysteries. It is impossible to tell where and when these would stop, if ever they would stop. Today, if we were to look into the future, say 10 or 20 years from now, I would venture to say confidently, and one can be certain, that the emerging technologies of today, which we find so fascinating and absolutely up there in the order of scientific and engineering excellence, and therefore perhaps creating strategic instabilities, will surely be overtaken by even greater and more innovative developmental marvels of technologies. This is in the nature of the beast, science and technology. Today's emerging technologies that we view and debate with such awe will probably pale into lesser significance when the scientists of the future would outdo themselves in inventing even more exotic technologies in a couple of years and decades from now. But as surely as night follows the day, the flip side constant of the history of military technologies is that strategists, antagonists, scientists, and engineers in each era invariably found antidotes and effective counters to the emerging technologies of their respective times. While many inventions initially developed for civil applications found their way into military applications, the fact is that in line with Newton's third law of motion, for every action, there was invariably an equal and opposite reaction. Thus, we find in military history that whether it was the then emerging technologies of archery, horse cavalry, artillery, a fighter airplane, a tank, a missile, a submarine, means of communications, lasers, satellites, or even a nuclear weapon, science and technology invariably provided near simultaneously a counter to that particular technology of the day. It is also a historical reality that all of these technological developments at different times in history did indeed lead to destabilizing the then prevailing strategic stability order for a while, but only up to such time until a counter technology or antidote re-established strategic stability. What follows from the past historical perspective that I've just said, therefore, is that the current and upcoming technologies that we today are referring to as emerging technologies would surely soon enough find their counters and antidote through timely scientific human endeavor. It's only a matter of time. Strategic stability, politically and militarily speaking, wherever disturbed, will soon then be reestablished. And that, in my opinion, is a lesson of history in the interplay of the forces of science and technology and strategic stability. And since today we are examining the effects of emerging technologies in the context of South Asia, that is India and Pakistan, it would be quite relevant to recall the effects of the then emerging technologies on strategic stability in South Asia, which were generated at various times in the short history of 75 years of South Asia. The inductions of the then state-of-the-art technologies in the form of the F-86 Sabre jets, the F-104 Star fighters, the varieties of Mirages, MiGs, F-16s, and now the Rafale fighter aircraft, the S-400, the BVR missiles, the submarines armed with harpoons and crotales, the various versions of US and Soviet-built tanks and artillery, culminating in the development of nuclear weapons in South Asia, complete with a long inventory of ballistic and cruise missiles, are all examples of new or emerging technologies that arrived at a certain point in time on the South Asian strategic scene, played their due role in destabilizing the strategic stability paradigm in South Asia for a while, till the other side did catching up, found an antidote of an equal and opposite technology, and only to restore the disturbed strategic balance. It is only logical, therefore, to expect that with the availability of ever-evolving exotic technologies for the purposes of deterrence, or for furthering military advantage against perceived adversaries, or for fighting wars, strategists and practitioners of war will continue to make adjustments and introduce innovation in deterrence strategies, warfighting techniques, tactics, doctrines, and strategies, what you will. As has happened so often in the past, some of these technologies developed for civil applications with essentially the good of humanity at heart will continue to be adopted wherever possible to serve the purposes of new types of warfare, kinetic or non-kinetic. The phenomena also works the other way around, where strategists and practitioners of war will continue to demand that a certain type of category or technology be developed by scientists and engineers through focused R&D to meet the ends of strategies. And so the cycle continues. The cooperative and corporate interests of governments, the military-industrial complexes, the military strategists and practitioners, the think tanks, and scientists and engineers of various shades perpetuate a common vested interest. And welcome to the exclusive club. Some of the emerging technologies on the frontier that are today creating waves and threatening to destabilize South Asia, if and when these are inducted into the war-fighting machines of India and Pakistan, are those that would be incorporated into a variety of weapon systems, including the instruments of the fifth generation and hybrid wars. These may include kinetic weapons or non-kinetic systems capable of disruption of the adversary's military defenses or civilian way of life, based on artificial intelligence, robotics, directed energy weapons, cyber domains, speed technologies for missiles like hypersonic missiles, drones in variety, ever-expanding horizons of the BVR missiles, and a host of others. And if practiced with abandon by either India or Pakistan, sensing a perceived technological advantage would most certainly have the effect of destabilizing South Asia. And that in an environment where both India and Pakistan possess a wide variety of nuclear weapons in the form of established triads could trigger a sequence of uncontrollable events. The Armageddon could well start with a relatively low-level first-rung spark, but climb rapidly like wildfire on a potentially domino-like escalatory ladder with catastrophic consequences not only for the two antagonists, but for the wider region with global effects. India's weapons and high technology acquisition policies with the West have consistently been based on what is now an accepted norm of cover and deception by India in playing the China card artfully, way beyond its legitimate defensive needs. The West plays along quite agreeably for its own geopolitical reasons in the pursuit of its contain China policies. Whether these destabilizing high technologies are inducted from the West or are based on indigenous developments by the DRDO, strategic stability in South Asia is invariably the first casualty. The resultant strategic instability and the strategic effects that it generates on Pakistan's security are not taken into account in the Western calculus. Given the Western focus on containment of the rise of China, identified and reiterated as recently as last week in the US National Security Strategy NSS document, Western and Indian politico-strategic interests therefore converge conveniently in the areas of defense and technology cooperation, amongst many others. As a result, exceptionalism for India has been exercised time and time again in the Western hope, and I repeat, in the Western hope of propping up India as a counterweight to China. The exemption from the Nuclear Suppliers Group, NSG, is one example. Acceptance of violations of the MTCR range limits of cruise missiles is another. And politically speaking, acceptance of human rights violations bordering on genocide in Indian-occupied Jammu and Kashmir is yet another. And so the sorry story of strategic collusion and exceptionalism for India goes on. All this in the vain hope of inducting India into the Western policies of contain China. Like I said, I use the word hope meaningfully because India has demonstrated at critical junctures that it would not oblige the West in payback when it comes to India's own national interests, and perhaps rightly so. India has retained sufficiently strong ties with Russia, especially due to its heavy dependence on Russian military inventory. India has played to the West's need to contain the rise of China without itself undertaking any meaningful obligations and commitments as payback. We have seen how in the ongoing Ukraine crisis, India has played both sides of the fence and protected its national interests quite unapologetically while the US and Europe watch helplessly. Having said that, the cold reality of Pakistan's geopolitical dilemma with the destabilizing effects generated on the delicately balanced South Asian strategic stability paradigm by the induction of a variety of emerging technologies in the Indian armory is that Pakistan is invariably left to fend for itself. And fend for ourselves we do. History is witness to the fact that Pakistan has invariably found appropriate solutions to its security concerns and corrected the strategic balances whenever and wherever necessary from whichever means possible. Pakistan has always accepted challenges of rectifying strategic and security imbalances and succeeded. One can therefore be certain once again that in the future as well, the challenge posed by various emerging technologies that might tend to destabilize the South Asian strategic stability paradigm will be fully met. There should be no doubt that while nuclearization of South Asia has ensured the outlawing of large-scale kinetic wars where strategic deterrence works to Pakistan's relative advantage, Pakistan, as a robust nuclear power with a strong military-industrial infrastructure, is quite capable of ensuring that to every destabilizing Indian action, there would be an equal and opposite stabilizing reaction from Pakistan. Pakistan's national security is sacrosanct and will never be left at the mercy and vagaries of international geopolitical weather and technologically created imbalances. I thank you, ladies and gentlemen.
Ladies and gentlemen, due to other commitments, General Kidwai has to leave at this point. But before he leaves, I would request Squadron Leader Ghani Akbar, retired, who is a Pakistan Air Force war hero, to present cash souvenir to our keynote speaker, General Kidwai. I would now request the panelists of this session, the speakers of next session, President CAS and CAS directors to join us on stage for a group photograph. We will now resume our proceedings. Our next speaker will be joining us online, and I will hand over the proceedings to Air Marshal Ashfaq once again, sir.
Ladies and gentlemen, our next speaker, Sierra Colonel Yang Jun, from the retired, will be joining from Beijing. Sierra Colonel Yang Jun retired. He from People's Liberation Army, and he's a senior research fellow at the China Institute for International Strategic Studies, CIISS. He served in the Chinese People's Liberation Army for over 33 years, where he held multiple command and staff appointments. He also served as Defense Attaché of the Chinese Embassy to Lebanon. His areas of expertise include military equipment, technology, and the Middle East. He would be speaking on technologies and future warfare, impact and options. In his talk, Senior Colonel Yang Jun will highlight the impact of technological development on warfare. Sorry. In his talk, Senior Colonel Yang Jun will highlight the impact of technological development on warfare, putting increasing requirements for systematic, quantified, and engineering-based military theories. He would focus on changes necessary in the traditional and stereotype thinking, necessitating greater consideration for data and algorithms, strengthening integration of warfighting and technological development, as well as research and operations, leading to new operational concepts to design new approaches to military victory. Senior Colonel Yang Jun, now the mic is yours, please.
Honorable Air Marshal Arang,
尊敬的各位官长、各位学者朋友，大家下午好。
honorable guests, ladies and gentlemen, good afternoon.
很荣幸主持人给我一个在 CASS 这个高阶论坛上一个发言的机会。
I'm very honored to be invited to speak here.
我今天想就当代军事技术与未来战争谈一点个人观点，请
Here,
大
I
家指
would
教。
like to share with you my personal views regarding the contemporary military technologies and future warfare.
好，下边我就开始。16世纪以来，
Since the 16th century, mankind has experienced 5 rounds of science and technology revolution.
科学技术的每一
Every major breakthrough in science and technology was rapidly applied to the military field, advancing the development of a series of major weapons and equipment, and driving the forms of war to evolve from hot and cold weapon warfare to mechanized warfare to IT-based warfare, and then to intelligent warfare. Technological advantage has become an important material basis for establishing military superiority. First, latest trends in the development of military technologies and equipment in the new century. Since the beginning of the 21st century, science and technology has been developing at an increasingly high speed. and the fields of military technology, major breakthroughs have constantly made in strategic advanced technologies, along with important progress in the research and development of disruptive technologies, and remarkably a boost in the operational effectiveness of weapons and equipment. All these have triggered profound changes in operational modes. Firstly, cyber technologies that could be game changers for future warfare. At present, with the cyberspace and the physical world closely interconnected, cyber and information technologies are widely used in military fields. The integration of cyber warfare and electronic warfare will affect all areas of military and civil operations in the future. What is alarming is the absence of international law that regulates cyber warfare. Some military powers have already established asymmetric advantages cyber operations, as well as an all-around capability that enables indiscriminate voice monitoring, mobile phone information theft, wireless positioning, and other tricks. To build an effective cybersecurity firewall and a matching cyber arsenal is crucial to national security, strategic games, and winning future wars. Secondly, disruptive technologies that could undermine traditional advantages. Firstly, active efforts are made to develop direct energy weapons such as laser, microwave, particle beam, and radio frequency weapons. These new concept weapons can hit the target instantaneously and attack multiple targets successively in a short time with little collateral damage. Secondly, the development of hypersonic technologies with a flight speed of Mach 5 and above is also vigorously underway. If the speed reaches 20 times of the speed of sound, it would be able to deliver a global strike within 1 hour, which is almost unstoppable. Thirdly, constant efforts have been made to explore high-efficiency damage technologies. The explosive yield of the fourth generation or nitrogen energetic materials can exceed 5 times that of TNT, which delivers exponential damage effect. Fourthly, targeted efforts have been made to tackle the mysterious quantum technology, as quantum communication technologies can deliver secret communications that is absolutely secure. Quantum computer, quantum radar, and quantum positioning technologies will set up a new wave in the traditional military field. Thirdly, AI technologies that could dominate the future battlefield. As artificial intelligence and man-machine fusion technologies continue to advance, the operational tempo will grow faster and faster until it reaches singularity, when human brain can no longer cope with a rapidly changing battlefield and has to delegate most decision-making power to highly intelligent machines. AI is strong in terms of logical reasoning, imagination, deep learning, and efficient adaptation, and is expected to play an increasingly important role in the future in intelligent sensing and information processing, intelligent command and control, and aid decision-making, unmanned military platform, bionic robot, human function augmentation, etc. Fourth, space technologies that could help snatch the strategic high ground. Major power rivalry in the space has become an important part of the current military struggle. Countries are competing fiercely in such fields as satellite reconnaissance, space-based anti-missile, satellite communications, database decision-making, traffic management, and on-orbit services. The explosive growth of commercial technologies has also promoted the development of space technologies for military use. Low-orbit satellite constellation technologies represented by Starlink have become a mainstream solution to low-latency global communications, and they registered rather good performance in the Russian-Ukraine conflict. The high revisit rates and high stability of such low-orbit satellite clusters are winning the attention of more and more countries. They have great potential in future battlefield communications, intelligence, surveillance, and recon, anti-missile interception, etc. Fifth, biotechnologies that could lead new forms of war. Biotechnology has been widely infiltrated into military fields since its inception and has been constantly integrated with information technology, material technology, and manufacturing technology, becoming an important force driving the development of weapons and equipment. Virtual reality and brain function augmentation technology will effectively improve people's decision-making. Smart wearable technology, people's situational awareness, and physical strength enhancement and cognition intervention technology, people's physical strength, skills, and ability to adapt. In addition, genetic recombination could create super soldiers. The development of biotechnology for military use will surely give rise to new combat modes and concepts. And my second part is technology's influence on future warfare. The influence of high-tech on warfare goes through 3 stages: intervention, support, and dominance. And that now it is transitioning from intervention phase to support phase. Once it enters the dominant stage, the traditional forms of war will be completely changed. First, the evolution of the fight for superiority. With accelerated application of information technology in the military field, major military powers in the world have begun to compete for IT superiority in the military field. In the future warfare, IT superiority will become the core component of military superiority. Although such kinds of superiority is not physical, it has a de facto bearing on all the other dimensions, in the sense that it serves as a multiplier to the capabilities in these dimensions. Without IT superiority, established superiority in other dimensions can only be short-lived. Secondly, new winning mechanisms that defy the traditional ones. The IT-based warfare is network-centric warfare, where connectivity is the core and information is the decisive strength. In such warfare, energy is pulled and released through network, and systemic responses are employed against partial attacks, network's response against scatter attacks, and quick responses against slow attacks. On the other hand, intelligent warfare is cognition-centric warfare, with computing being the core capacity. In such warfare, intelligence is the dominant strength, which takes up more weight than firepower, mobility, and information power. The ultimate goal is to harness with intelligence. Thirdly, fundamental changes to the forms of war. In future warfare, hybrid manned and unmanned operation will become the basic mode of operation. There are 3 stages leading up to unmanned operation. First, manned operation assisted by unmanned operation. Second, unmanned operation assisted by manned operation. And third, unmanned operation following man-made rules. The rapid development of intelligence will endow the command and control system with more advanced and full-fledged decision-making capability and gradually realize human out of the loop. Fourth, changes in the way combat effectiveness is generated. The development and application of disruptive technologies will greatly change the basic elements that generate combat effectiveness. The biggest difference between intelligent weapons and other weapons is that intelligent ones have strong self-learning and self-growing abilities. With the accumulation of operational experience, they continue to learn, improve, and effectively integrate the methods to deal with different battlefield conditions, thus continuously growing and iterating, generating intelligent combat effectiveness. Fifth, constantly emerging methods of operation. Technological innovation will eventually bring about changes in methods of warfare. Intelligent combat methods such as algorithmic warfare, swarm warfare, and instant warfare have begun to emerge. Going forward, as disruptive technologies gradually become mature and begin to be applied, new methods of warfare and new concepts will erupt. These constantly emerging new modes of war will bring future warfare to multiple dimensions, including land, sea, airspace, electromagnetic space, and cyberspace, and fully unleash the physical advantages in terms of speed, height, and power. 6. Major changes in military formation. With the support of advanced decision-making and control technologies, the organizational structure of military forces will become more modular, flexible, and multifunctional. Various forces can be organically integrated and dynamically organized, and support ad hoc reorganization based on operational process and task changes. The proportion of computer operators will be higher and higher, even higher than that of soldiers with guns. Manned-unmanned teaming will become reality in near future. There could even be whole drone troops. My third part is the influence of new technologies on military theories. In the interest of time, I will be quite precise with that. A military power once floated the idea that one theory guides one war and one war rules out one theory. Driven by the development of technologies, the current forms of war are increasingly more intelligent. Major countries constantly adjust their strategies and strengthening their military force buildup. All these forces have given rise to a gold time for military theories, which show the following trends. Firstly, emphasis is given to information-led integrated operations as well as the combination of soft means with hard means. Theories such as network-centric warfare and cognition-centric warfare highlight the importance of information superiority and advocate that various systems should be formed into a network information system, and that through man-machine integration, real-time sensing of battlefield conditions can be realized and it can be transformed into advantages in terms of decision-making and actions, which would finally lead to victory. Another example is strategic paralysis warfare, which stresses to combine the soft means that seek to break the enemy's will with the hard means that destroy the enemy's military forces or key facilities so as to achieve tactical and operational goals like physical mental double strike or COG node double strike. Secondly, emphasis is given to both integrated operations of different services and fields and mixed operation involving political, economic, military, and other means. Thirdly, emphasis is given to both existing forms of war, such as information operation and long-range precision operation, and other forms involving cyberspace and unmanned equipment. Many countries have realized that information operations have become one of the most effective forms of operations, which can quietly plunge a country into chaos. Firefight will mostly take the form of the exchange of fire between high-precision weapon systems, highlighting the suddenness and rapid mobility of operations. At the same time, it is necessary to constantly innovate forms of operation involving cyberspace and unmanned equipment so as to support flexible combination of multi-field operations such as UAV swarm warfare, distributed killing, and manned-unmanned cooperative warfare. Fourthly, emphasis is given both to drawing the merits of traditional warfare and to asymmetric warfare that plays to one's strength. For those great military powers, high-tech operational theories and methods represented by space operations, cyberspace operations, and electronic warfare are developing rapidly and have integrated with each other. However, relatively backward countries and non-state actors are actively developing asymmetric warfare theories and methods, such as unrestricted warfare theory that plays to their strengths while avoiding weaknesses. Here comes my conclusion. Entering into the new century, the rapid development and application of new technologies have accelerated the evolution of forms of war. Against this background, the space, field, and dimension of military activities are expanding day by day, putting forward higher requirements for systematic, quantified, and engineering-based military theories. Future warfare can only be won by grasping the laws and characteristics of modern warfare, jumping out of the box of traditional thinking and stereotypes, and taking into consideration systems, data, and algorithms, exploring new operation concepts, designing new winning mechanisms, strengthening the integration of warfighting and technological development and that of research and operations, and drawing on other strengths to make up for one's own shortcomings.
That's all. Thank you.谢谢。
Thank you very much, Senior Colonel Yang John. And he was very apt in describing the technologies and their implications and how to work out the future. Ladies and gentlemen, our next speaker is Dr. George Malcolm Moore. Dr. Moore is presently working as scientist in residence and adjunct professor, James Martin Center for Non-Proliferation Studies, Middlebury Institute of International Studies, USA, since 2012. Earlier, he worked with the UN and National Atomic Energy Agency as senior analyst. He was also responsible for compiling IAEA's Fundamentals for Nuclear Security document. He would be discussing drones and proliferation of lethal autonomous weapon systems, normally called laws, and the new battle space. Dr. Malcolm Moore in his presentation will discuss how the current and future proliferation of drones and lethal autonomous weapons has and will change both military and civil security. He will also discuss the effect of AI and the removal of the human element from lethal decision making, impact on current and potential future international agreements, and lowering of the threshold for conflict. Dr. Moore, the mic is yours, please.
I cannot share my screen now. Can you set it up so I can share my screen? I have a PowerPoint presentation.
Oh, okay, I'll just do. आप screen sharing उनकी on कर दें.
Okay. Well, while I'm waiting for that, let me say thank you to CASS for inviting me to make this presentation. I will be very happy to share the presentation with any of the participants. I think maybe the sponsors are going to do that in any event. Let me see if we've got screen sharing now. I'm still disabled from screen sharing. Maybe I'll wait another minute to do that. Now I can share my screen. All right. You should be able to share my screen now if somebody can give me verbal feedback that that's happening.
Yeah, we've got you, George.
Okay, good. Okay, I'm going to be talking about drones and proliferation of laws. We're going to be talking about a range of drones, from big military drones. This is the U.S. Reaper. This is a small Chinese DJI Phantom. Both have become important. As you all, I'm sure, are aware, the term drone covers a lot of uncrewed vehicles. And uncrewed is the new gender-neutral term, which is gaining usage throughout the world. These uncrewed vehicles can operate on air, land, under and on the water, and any combination thereof. But we're going to be focusing on this talk on uncrewed aerial vehicles and uncrewed aerial systems. And we're going to confine the discussion of laws to these systems. Before we go too far, I want to just briefly point out that drones are not a new concept. A lot of the ramifications of drones are new, but back in the Vietnam era, we used the BQM-34s for photo reconnaissance. This is a small drone. This is a C-130 aircraft. The C-130 aircraft in Vietnam era would be an Air Force aircraft and would launch these little drones, and they're like a small jet engine, and they would fly over North Vietnam and take photos. This is a drone anti-submarine helicopter, vintage 1960s, 1970s. The idea was to take an anti-submarine torpedo out to a range of 20 to 30 miles, far in excess of what the destroyer that carried the Dash helicopter could deliver the weapon at. This actually is 1918. This is the end of the First World War. This is a Kettering Doodlebug. It was a small biplane launched on a ramp, carried a load of explosives, a 4-cylinder engine, and this was one of the first uses of Sperry gyroscopes to implement an autopilot. The idea was this would fly out to 60 or 70 miles, the engine would shut off, and it would crash down into the target. Surprisingly, when we talk about the Shahed 136, it's remarkably similar type of mission profile. This is actually a model of the Kettering Doodlebug that was built up. This is at the Air Force Museum at Wright-Patterson Air Force Base in Ohio. So, what's changed? Well, what's changed is components are now miniaturized. Computers, control units, communication systems. We now have satellite comms. I was mentioned earlier that someone sitting in Florida could be controlling a drone half a world away. I've actually been in one of the control units for the old Predator system, and that's quite true. Navigational positioning systems have really, this is the last 20 years or so, the GPS, the GLONASS, Baidu, and Galileo all come together. In fact, there was just a report today that the Russians have been improving the accuracy of the Iranian drones that they acquired by shifting them over to GLONASS navigation. And artificial intelligence, of course, artificial intelligence being incorporated in the newer, smaller, more powerful computers. There's a civil threat. This is a picture of a reactor in France. This is a Greenpeace flown little drone that's shaped like Superman, the comic book character, and they flew this and crashed into the side of the reactor containment vessel just to illustrate that that could be done. This is a picture taken from another drone that was following it. But we're going to talk primarily about lethal drones, military lethal drones, and we're going to spend some time talking about what's gone on in Ukraine. And this is a driving force, and I think it'll be a driving force for a number of follow-on programs that will soon, I think, come to lead to or trigger an arms race among a number of states. So this is the way the U.S. military categorizes drones. They put them into 5 groups based on their weight, their operating altitudes, their speeds. Here are some examples. We start down here at the low end. These are handheld, hand-launched drones that can be thrown ahead. They're primarily for surveillance to see what's around the corner, over the hill, that sort of thing. You get up here in the bigger drones. Notice this is tails down. The Predator, this is a Predator, and the Reaper look very similar, made by the same company. I tell my students, if you only learn one thing, tails down, it's a Predator, tails up, it's a Reaper. This is Global Hawk. We'll talk a little bit more about Global Hawk. All of these, again, here's a Reaper, tails up. Reaper is a lot bigger, has more capability, and all the Predators are now out of the U.S. operational inventory. Many of them have been transferred to other agencies, such as the Drug Enforcement Agency. This is a control unit for Predator Reaper type control. 2 stations. These are in usually military vans, so they can be moved around. You have here on the right is actually using the pilot console. On the left is the systems operator. Those can be switched back and forth. One of the interesting things that I found about these is that they communicate by a secure chat line. Instead of voice communications, it's a secure chat line. But the point here is that even these most big military drones are really remotely piloted vehicles. They are not autonomous. There can be autonomous drones. Some of the loitering munitions, and that's a question whether you really want to refer to them as drones. Some of the loitering munitions are autonomous. So here is Global Hawk. This is almost the size, major fraction of the size of a Boeing 737 aircraft. This has extraordinary range, extraordinary capability, and it has the option of being truly autonomous. In other words, if you program it to do it, it can start up its engines, taxi out of its revetment, take the runway, fly its mission, come back, land, go back to its parking space, shut down its engines, and then wait to have its information downloaded, or it can download from the air. Extremely capable. As with most drones, and this is one of the higher speed drones, most drones have traditionally been very low speed. The Predator Reaper operations, most people are familiar with these. These have been done in many areas of the world by the U.S. You can argue about whether they are legal, illegal. There's been a tremendous effort to minimize collateral damage. Two basic principles of warfare, proportionality and discrimination. Discrimination is protecting civilians from being casualties. With some notable exceptions, this works very well. One of the things that we'll maybe touch on a bit later, the operators of these drones sometimes will be in contact with the target, tracking the target for weeks or months. It's a very different mental picture that they have, and they live a kind of strange existence. They're fighting a war 8 hours a day, and the rest of the time they go home to their families. It's a very strange existence. And it has led, in some instances, to what we call PTSD. This is post-traumatic stress disorder, because they just can't cope with the change that goes on a daily basis. An issue about all these systems, whether it's U.S. or other systems, is who controls them when you're doing lethal targeting. There's a split in the United States between the military and the CIA, but in other countries it may be totally the military, it may be totally intelligence agencies, might be some other operation controlling them. I won't talk much about uncrewed combat aerial vehicles. Air Commodore Clark, who's in the next session, I think will be talking about those. One thing about drones is kind of unique, and that's the ability to swarm. Term swarming means that the drones communicate with each other and they act in concert. This is considered to be quite a threat, and quite a threat to making drone operations against other types of military operations very asymmetric. A number of small drones, for example, could destroy manned aircraft, but I don't want to get into that too much. So let's talk. We don't have a lot of time here. Let's talk about lessons from the Ukraine. I said ongoing lessons here because these things are changing daily. This is a picture of the Turkish drone, the Bayraktar TB2, which has been provided to the Ukrainians. They had, I think, around 20 of them maybe at the start of the war. Turkey apparently has continued to supply these. But one of the issues which has been very surprising, at least to myself and maybe to other people, is that prior to the war in Ukraine, I think there was an assumption that drones could only operate successfully in lightly or undefended areas. That it was if any kind of high AAA anti-aircraft artillery or any kind of sophisticated air defense, drones could not operate because they're so slow in speed and they have, no defensive capability. But that has not proven to be true in Ukraine. And this is one of the things that I think will engage a lot of the militaries around the world and lead to a big upsurge in both increasing offensive and defensive capabilities of drones. A number of the drones, what we've been calling drones, or what the media has been calling suicide drones, these are really more loitering munitions. Now, these are lethal autonomous weapon systems. They just go out, seek their target by whatever means they use. Maybe they have a small radar in the front end. Maybe they have a small capability of selecting a target, and maybe they're just launched like apparently the Shahed drones are launched to a georef position. So the issue that's coming up right now, for the most part, early in the war, there had been some person in the loop on these things. In other words, with the Bayraktars, someone controls them. They're like a predator. Someone makes a decision whether to launch a missile. With the old Predator system on high magnification from 25,000 feet, the operator could see about the size of a football field. And one of the things that happen tragically sometimes is once the missile launch from the aircraft is done, it can't be recalled. Now, if you think about looking at a road with a vehicle going down the road, which is your target vehicle, and you have maybe 150 yards ahead of it, and you have a 3-second or 4-second delay because you're halfway around the world, once you launch in that 3 or 4 seconds, someone can come in the opposite direction, come into the field, and they will be, unfortunately, collateral damage. So this is a little Switchblade anti-armored vehicle drone. This is the Shahed 136. The Russians have apparently renamed this Geran or Germanium 2. They've put different nomenclature on it, but it really is this Iranian-built drone. They've been referred to as kamikaze drone, loitering munitions. It is a lethal autonomous weapon system. It's a fire and forget type system where you launch it and it goes. They're rocket assisted on takeoff. This shows an array of these. These have been incorrectly identified as swarming vehicles. They are not swarming in the sense of drones. They are saturation in the sense that they can be, a number of them be launched towards the same target and overload the defensive system. Couple of points here quickly about who makes drones and who will be involved in drone arm races. Basically, all the major powers now are putting out drones, which they're selling. U.S. is a large producer. France, Turkey, People's Republic of China, Israel for many years was the major manufacturer of drones overseas, military drones overseas. And I'm sure many people are familiar with the fact that Pakistan also makes drones. I probably mispronounce this, but I call it Barak. Again, a small drone. One of the things about, let me go back to the Shahed, this drone has extremely long range. It's about a 400 kilogram drone. It has approximately 2,000 kilometer, 2,500 kilometer range, which struck me as being probably wrong, but then I went back and did some calculations based on the size of the airframe. The engine, it's got a small 50 horsepower engine. It doesn't fly very fast, maybe 150 kilometers per hour, so it doesn't do well against a headwind, but it can carry enough fuel for, assuming this thing burns maybe 4 or 5 gallons per hour, it can carry enough fuel to get that far. So that range is probably not inaccurate. And this leads into another issue, there really are no conventions and agreements about drones. Maybe one of the things that will happen post-Ukraine, if we ever get back to a situation where we can get into negotiations with Russian Federation, we may get some agreements on the use of drones. But right now, the only thing that really seems to be even impacting it, the impact is very slight, is the Missile Technology Control Regime, the MTCR. And there, the drones come in because of a limit on range. You can make this argument that the drone is really, some people call it a poor person's cruise missile. And in some aspects it is, a shorter range cruise missile perhaps. Export control, there's no real strong export control regime on an international basis. The US and other countries have export control on some aspects of drone technology. That is probably going to be seriously revisited in the wake of what's gone on in the Ukraine. So other issues coming out of Iraq, detectability, particularly the small drones. I don't think anyone anticipated that small drones like the DJI Phantom, that type of small size drone, would have any military use or consequence. It turns out they've been doing a lot of things in terms of surveillance, targeting, directing artillery strikes, spotting. They're an uncrewed spotter that is so slow in speed, it's probably not detected by search radars, because they have most search radars and maybe even fire control radars have Doppler settings to prevent them. By that I mean you don't want to clutter up your screen with a lot of low-speed targets. So most search radars have an input that you put in that screens out things that are moving at too slow a speed, and they may screen out some of these small drones at really low speeds. They also have a low radar aspect. How do you intercept them? It's not sending a manned fighter plane to do that is probably not going to work. It's been very surprising that the Russian Federation has not been able to exercise more airspace control over Ukraine than apparently it has been able to do. Interception, too small for manned aircraft attack. That's what you just covered. They may be too small. Depends on the size of the anti-aircraft artillery. A number of them will fire what are called VT or proximity rounds. These are a small, the round itself has a small radar. They may be too small to trigger a VT proximity. And they may be operating at too high an altitude or too small to be effectively countered with small arms and light anti-aircraft. There have been many scenes on the internet showing the Shahed drones coming down in Kiev, and policemen and people like that firing automatic weapons trying to stop them. Not probably a very successful way of trying to bring down a drone, particularly when it has an impact detonating warhead. Final thought, Zaporizhia, a little bit off base, but it goes back to concerns that we have about military attacks in the Ukraine. Should there be radiation leaks? Well, the IAEA has been encouraging the development of radiation monitoring with drones. That's fairly sophisticated now. I just came back last week of September from an IAEA technical meeting at Brno in the Czech Republic. This is this is a model of a Swiss drone carrying a large radiation monitoring instrumentation pack. So conclusions, post-Ukraine, there should be a increase in military use of drones and a restructuring of the military drone defense capabilities. I think there's going to be increases in the abilities of drones. They're going to become better with AI. They're going to maybe become higher speed. You may see a bifurcation where you will see a driving force going in the high-end drone operation, more the high-end military, but also a big increase in capability of the low end of drones. And there may be international moves to regulate drone proliferation and address lethal autonomy. Some of this may come from human rights legislation, where the argument can be made that you need to have good discrimination, or you're violating human rights laws. Some people fear drones because they are too accurate. Some people fear drones because they are not accurate enough. But those things will play out in the future. I think I've exhausted my time. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Dr. Moore. So what he's suggesting is that looking at the recent and the current conflicts, there's all the likelihood that in all future conflicts there will be increasingly more application of UAVs and lethal autonomous weapons, and then there will be a requirement for export control of such weapons or to control employment of these weapons. Thank you, Dr. George. Ladies and gentlemen, our next speaker is Ms. Marina Favero. Ms. Marina Favero is Senior Research Fellow at the Institute for Peace, Research and Security Policy, University of Hamburg, where she is responsible for managing the multi-year research program, Novel Approaches to Understanding Emerging Technologies. She is also a research consultant at the Center for Science and Security Studies, King's College London. Earlier, she has also worked as Emerging Technologies Program Manager and Policy Fellow at BASIC, Analyst at RAND Europe, and Fundraising Manager and Project Manager at Global Reporting Center. She has a large number of publications to her credit. Her expertise includes designing and delivering research for focusing on the impact of emerging technology and safety and security. She'll be discussing military applications of AI and cyber, implications for strategic stability. She would in general be discussing, could large-scale cyber attacks result in military conflicts and decision dilemma leading to unpredictable responses? Possible implications of combined use of AI and cyber on strategic stability? And will AI help in conflict management or lead to escalation? Ms. Marina, the mic is yours, please. आप screen sharing इनकी on कर दें.
I'm just sharing my screen right now. Hopefully you can see that all right. Can someone just give me a
Yes, we can see that.
Communication? Perfect. Well, thank you so much to the organizers for having me here today. I wish I could have been there in person. Thank you so much for the introduction. I think that covers my introduction from myself. I suppose in one sentence, the work I do is I use futures and foresight methods to better understand the impact of emerging military technologies on strategic stability. And so, without further ado, great. So my research has culminated in a few publications recently on this topic. One that I did for King's College London, which is on the left here, which was published in 2021, and one more recently, which was published last month by the IFSH. This most recent study is called Negative Multiplicity. It's essentially a technology mapping exercise, and the overall objective of the study was to forecast the future impacts of emerging technologies on strategic stability and human security. So in this presentation, I will show you the kind of bigger picture from this report, but I'll also focus specifically on AI capabilities and which emerging technologies operate or have some capabilities in the cyber domain. I think that the previous speakers did a great job of giving an overview of some of these emerging technologies, which I hope this will complement their remarks. So taking a step back, the starting premise of the study, which we've already heard in the opening remarks, are that there's this new generation of technologies with potential military applicability, and these technologies could individually or collectively impact international peace and security to a degree that's worth evaluating. There are, however, some significant challenges with doing this type of work, the first being defining emerging technologies. So I offer this working definition, which is emerging technologies are those technologies, scientific discoveries, and technological applications that have not yet reached maturity or are not yet widely in use, but are anticipated to have a major and perhaps disruptive effect on international peace and security. Also, on the definitions point, it's worth teasing out a few different terms. So there are military operating domains, such as cyber and space. We talk about enabling technologies, such as AI or quantum. And we also talk about the application of emerging technologies in the military domain, such as using AI to confer military or to confer autonomy to weapon systems, as we just heard in the conversation about laws. The second challenge with doing this type of work is where to focus. So some scholars focus on specific technologies, which is quite understandable, I think. This often reflects trending topics in the space, such as drones or hypersonic missiles. I think this is a good starting point for the conversation, but novel technologies aren't emerging sequentially. They're developing together and they will interact in very complex ways, which makes a practical necessity for prioritization because states don't have unlimited resources to invest in all emerging technologies equally. And finally, the siloed nature of these conversations. So the conversation about emerging technologies is often quite siloed when we're talking about their potential impact. Studies on the impact on strategic stability often leave out the human element and vice versa. And what this obscures is the extent to which international stability and human security inform and shape one another. So to give you a few high-level takeaways from this study, essentially we asked 30 international experts to forecast the developmental trajectories of 12 emerging technologies in the United States, Russia, and China out until 2040, and to score the possible future impact on arms race stability, crisis stability, and humanitarian principles. And then I used a variety of data analysis techniques, including machine learning, to analyze this data. And we found three things that I want to highlight as high-level takeaways from this study. The first is that our data reveals a negative multiplicity. So on average, the impact of these technologies is expected to be negative overall, with some technologies negatively affecting all three of these dependent variables, so arms race stability, crisis stability, and humanitarian principles. The impact of these technologies doesn't always square exactly with their technical characteristics. So an example of this is not all AI technologies are clustered together when we use the machine learning algorithm to analyze the different impacts that experts think that these technologies might have. And finally, there's this nascent technological arms race that experts are picking up on. So the expected alignment of technological trajectories for the US, Russia, and China to 2040 suggest that there is this nascent technological arms race that threatens to seriously impede international arms control efforts to regulate these technologies. Just to give you an idea of the kind of questions that were guiding our study, we were wondering what impacts will emerging technologies have on arms race stability, crisis stability, and humanitarian principles to 2040? Which emerging technologies show similarities in terms of their impact? And when will the impact of these technologies become most acute? So this is the list of technologies that we surveyed. You can see that we differentiated between the technology category and the technology application. There are 4 technologies that were underpinned by AI, and these are AI for C4ISR, AI for weapons and effects, so lethal autonomous weapon systems would fall into this category, AI for cyber operations, and AI for information warfare. We didn't look at any cyber technologies specifically, but that's because a lot of these technologies have implications in the cyber domain, but I didn't think that cyber technologies was a kind of meaningful category. It was very difficult to say what might go into that because there's such a plethora of different techniques that can be used in the cyber domain. So some of the technologies that address cyber capabilities are quantum for hardening and exploiting systems. So this is kind of a quantum for cybersecurity, or anti-satellite capabilities, which might include cyber attacks on satellites. To collect our data, we used an enormous data collection sheet that looks like this. At the top, we asked experts for the technological development trajectories for each technology for 2020, 2030, and 2040 for the US, Russia, and China. This section looks at the arms race stability considerations, this section, the crisis stability considerations, and this section, the humanitarian principles considerations. Okay, so all that is just getting us ready to show the main results from this data collection exercise. The first thing that I want to highlight is that all 12 technologies were anticipated by experts to reach operational deployability by 2040 in the US, Russia, and China. So by this point, all these technologies will be in the technology readiness level band 7 to 9, so the deployability level, and they'll be expected to be usable on the battlefield. So you can see that in this graph here. This is for the US, where different technologies have different trajectories for 2021, 2030, and 2040. And you can see that the AI technologies start from a place of high readiness levels and continue to stay at that place, whereas other technologies have a much more meteoric rise. Among those technologies with a more meteoric rise are hypersonic weapon systems and directed energy weapon systems. So this could signify a greater arms race sooner rather than later. When you overlay these graphs for the US, Russia, and China, you get this graph, which shows all the technologies, all the country trajectory timelines. And what this essentially is meant to show you is that these countries are neck and neck, according to the experts, in terms of at what pace they will develop these technologies. So experts really emphasize that great power competition will be a main driver behind future R&D in these three countries. Next, we have the findings about the extent to which each technology might strengthen strategic stability or weaken it, and the same for human security. So experts thought that half of the technologies would predominantly weaken. We can see that here, their overall result. And the net impact of all the technologies was negative. So for no technology was it anticipated to strengthen arms race stability, crisis stability, and humanitarian principles. Though we do see that two technologies are expected to strengthen two of the three dependent variables. So AI for C4ISR is expected to strengthen arms race stability and crisis stability more than it weakens it. And quantum for C4ISR is expected to strengthen crisis stability and humanitarian principles more than it weakens it. I think this is an interesting finding. We see this data visualized slightly differently here. Again, I've highlighted all the AI applications so you can see where AI fits relative to all these different technologies. And the main takeaway here is that AI and quantum technologies for C4ISR are expected to have the most positive effects of any of the examined technologies. And this is because they have the ability to increase clarity and situational awareness, thereby increasing strategic stability. So this graph shows the a one-dimensional analysis for arms race stability and crisis stability. These are commonly seen as the two components of strategic stability, which is why I've highlighted them here. And on this side of the graph, you can see technologies that were anticipated by experts to be more impactful, and more impactful here is understood in a negative way. So the technologies that are seen as most negatively impactful towards arms race stability do feature a lot of AI technologies. And these include AI for information warfare, AI for cyber operations, and AI for weapons and effects. Whereas with crisis stability, it's a little bit more of a mixed bag. We see AI technologies kind of throughout the spectrum, and we don't see this clustering of AI technologies towards the more impactful end, and therefore the more negative end. But again, we do see that AI for information warfare is highlighted by experts as this uniquely disruptive force when it comes to crisis stability, and also when it comes to arms race stability. So I think that's one major conclusion that we can draw from these two graphs. Furthermore, we did a clustering exercise using a machine learning algorithm called k-means clustering. The idea here is essentially the machine learning algorithm can take all the scores given by experts and find meaningful groups of technologies that are scored similarly according to their impact characteristics. And this revealed some interesting findings. So in some cases, we see clustering according to technology groups. So we see one cluster here that looks at human enhancement technologies, one cluster that contains all the quantum technologies. But when it comes to AI, the picture is a little bit more blurry. So we see 3 of the 4 AI technologies clustered together. So these are AI for cyber operations, AI for C4ISR, and AI for weapons and effects. So we can assume that the way experts are scoring these is quite similar. But we see our 4th and final AI technology being clustered in another group, and this is AI for information warfare. And it's clustered in a group with anti-satellite capabilities, hypersonic weapon systems, and directed energy weapons. And this is quite interesting because this group doesn't exhibit the same kind of technical characteristics within that group. And so this was kind of one of the most surprising findings for me. And what we've kind of taken from this is that this cluster, which includes anti-satellite capabilities, hypersonic weapon systems, directed energy weapon systems, and AI for information warfare, is the most highly impactful cluster on crisis stability. And that's the thing that ties them together in the eyes of experts. Just to flag, if you're interested in reading our report, it also has these technology deep dives, which analyze each technology separately from each other and give all the qualitative scores that experts provided in the technology scoring exercise. So yeah, you can see kind of how different technologies were scored differently from each other. But in the interest of wrapping up, I think I have about 2 minutes left. I wanted to highlight some of the implications of militarized AI that I took from this study. So I think it's interesting that 3 of 4 military AI applications are clustered together and 1 is clustered in another group. So that shows us that just because they share the same enabling technology doesn't mean that they all are expected to have the same type of impact on strategic stability. Of these technologies, AI for information warfare shows uniquely negative characteristics across all 3 of these variables. Experts specifically highlighted the cumulative impact of sustained information operations. If you're interested, we can talk about this more in the Q&A. But when they're talking about concerns around AI for information warfare, they're not talking about a one-off deepfake video or image. They're talking about sustained kind of shifting of threat perceptions of decision makers. The second major concern, I think, in this group of AI technologies is AI for cyber operations. That's AI for augmenting either offensive or defensive operations. Of course, if you see this kind of the 2 sides of this coin, it could be either stabilizing or destabilizing, depending on how it's applied, which I think is true for a lot of these technologies. But yeah, experts did highlight that this had an overall more negative than positive impact. And finally, there are anticipated positive effects associated with AI for C4ISR, which would include information sharing, situational awareness, and confidence building. Briefly, some broader policy implications. I think this study underscores the negative environment created by geopolitical tensions. Experts perceive that this arms race between the US, Russia, and China is already underway. There's a lot of uncertainty surrounding Russia's technological trajectory, which is quite interesting. I think that uncertainty will only grow following the war in Ukraine and all the sanctions that are being imposed on Russia right now. And finally, our findings kind of underscore this dual picture. So on the one hand, they could paint the picture that significant difficulties are to be expected in the context of arms control because of this negative environment and this alignment of technological development trajectories. But on the other hand, arms control might seem more attractive when adversaries narrow the competitive gap and we're dealing with peer competitors. So that's my kind of 2-part takeaway from this. I'll skip through my avenues for future research in the interest of time and just say thank you so much for your attention, and I look forward to hearing from you in the Q&A. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ms. Marina. The 12 technologies which are likely to reach the operational deployability by 2040, they have the negative and positive implications for the human beings and strategic stability, and this depends on how we employ them. But the geostrategic competition and the rivalries, status consciousness, they will actually impact all these areas. Thank you very much once again. Now we'll have a question and answer session for about 45 minutes. I'll request the audience to ask questions. We'll make 2 to 3 questions. I'll pass them on to the speakers. If you can identify whom do you want to address your question to. So, ladies and gentlemen, the house is open. Yes, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. My name is Qazi Humayun. I'm a former ambassador to Afghanistan and Turkey. While talking about technology and war, the recent situation or developments in Afghanistan come to one's mind. My question is, short of genocide, the NATO has used drones quite frequently in the Afghan war. To your mind, what technology could have been used other than this in order to prevent the Taliban from taking over Afghanistan? On experience, people generally would agree with me that the religious technology and the bribing technology has worked there in the past. Thank you.
Thank you. Yes, please.
Assalamu alaikum. Sir, I am Mohammad Baba, student of Defense and Strategic Study from Qazi University. I have 2 questions. First is, do you think there should be some amendments in international law and international humanitarian law according to emerging technologies like lethal autonomous weapons? My second question is, do you think it will create a big imbalance among high-tech states and less high-tech states according to artificial intelligence-based weapons? Thank you very much.
Could you please repeat your first question?
So first question is, do you think there should be some amendments in international law and international humanitarian law according to emerging technologies like lethal autonomous weapons and artificial intelligence based other technologies? Thank you.
Yes, please.
Assalamualaikum everyone. My name is Abdul Samad. I'm a research officer at CISSS. My question is
could you please put your mic closer?
Sure, sir. My question is for Ms. Marina. Can you give us a sense of how far deep fake has progressed? We know and understand that DARPA, for example, is working on it. The Russians also have used asymmetric warfare. I think your point about information warfare being the most destabilizing factor in the future is very important. So in terms of deepfake, which countries are making headway? Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, I'll direct the first question to Dr. Malcolm. The question is that about the technologies and their employment during war, and according to him, the employment of technologies in Afghanistan was just short of genocide. So what technologies could have been used to control the Taliban or control the regime change in Taliban, and without much killings. I think let George Moore give an answer to that. आपने म्यूट किया हुआ है स्पीकर को? तीनों स्पीकर्स के माइक ऑन कर दें. Dr. Moore, I suppose your mic is may be muted.
I'm unmuted now. Can you hear me?
Yeah. Now I can.
Okay.
Hear you.
I mean, I think when you look at Afghanistan and the Taliban, you have to look at what was unfortunately a long, drawn-out process. We used both manned aircraft and drones, although drones may have raised some additional levels of concern. They were certainly preferable in terms of collateral damage to the manned aircraft strikes. I mean, if you look at the overall war from a perspective, whether we should be there or not be there, what actions we should take, that's one thing. But I think if you examine the individual targeting that was done by drones versus those done by manned aircraft, they had a little bit of a different flavor. The manned aircraft were more in direct support of troops on the ground. The drones were not, because of their weapon systems, that active in supporting actual troops engaged in ground combat. They were more used to attack remote targets and believed to be targets. There's some problems with what's called signature analysis, which is verifying the target based on some signature that's presented. For example, there was early on in the conflict, there was a strike, and the reason was because there was an extremely tall person who apparently the targeting people thought fit the signature of Osama bin Laden. It wasn't Osama bin Laden, and that's a real problem with doing signature analysis to do targeting. But I think on whole you'll find, if you accept the fact that drones are legal to use, that the drones are historically been, or at least historically, not that long a history, the use of the uncrewed drones in Afghanistan was less lethal than other alternatives. Now, I mentioned bribery and things like that. Yes, I suppose that in accomplishing political goals, bribery might have been preferable in some instances. Fortunately, my military service was before Afghanistan. I didn't have to deal with issues like warlords turning from one side to the other based on who was paying the most money. I think that's best I can do in answering that question.
Thank you. I think the second question also pertains to Dr. Moore. The first one was about the legal frameworks for the emerging technologies. And his second question related to that was, are these technological developments not creating an imbalance between the developed and the underdeveloped countries, and what could be the possible antidote with the developing countries or the less technologically developed countries to counter their developed adversaries?
Well, let me address the first one. I think there certainly will be attempts to control these various technologies through international agreements. I don't think that just a blanket agreement or a blanket treaty covering all technologies would work. I think that what would be preferable on the international scene are developing treaties and agreements based on known technologies. In other words, once we've gone far enough to say, hey, the missile technology control regime doesn't do much in terms of controlling the proliferation of drones. The proliferation of drones, we as an international community agree, is bad for some reasons. Then focus on that technology. I don't think just building more or saying in human rights law, gee, that's bad, is going to be nearly as effective as specifically targeted control regimes. Now, of course, you have to get cooperation, and people have to sign on to those regimes, and people have to abide by what they've agreed to. The second question, I've lost the second question now. I'm sorry, I lost track of what the second question was.
The second question was, what are the options with the lesser technologically developed countries?
Yes, now I recall. I think I agree with the question that there's going to be, just like in every developing technology, I mean, if you want to take hypersonic weapons, for an example, the technologically developed countries are going to be moving away from the less developed countries. But drone technology is a rather low-tech, in some aspects, technology. And it has the opportunity for creating asymmetries where the low technology countries employing advanced drone technology, which would not be very expensive, may have significant advantages in deterring or defending against high technology countries. So I guess that's what I would say on that issue. I notice Mr. Yang Zhun has his hand up, maybe wanted to say something on one of these answers.
Thank you. The next question is for Ms. Marina. The deepfake has serious implications on the information warfare. So the question is that how far the deepfake has progressed?
Yeah, thanks for this question. I think it's always something that interests audiences when I present on this finding. And actually, the study that I did for King's College London came to the same finding. So the most impactful and most easy to implement technology in that study was also deepfake technology. You asked which countries are making headway. I think that's slightly the wrong question. I would reframe it to which companies are making the most headway, because this is something that's being driven by the private sector. And indeed, you can download smartphone apps to create deepfakes that look quite sophisticated and will only continue to look more sophisticated in the future. And so I think that that's a really big point with this, is that innovation is coming from the private sector. It's something that will disrupt international peace and security, but is not a capability that's held by militaries or states per se. Yeah, I think people are always a bit skeptical when I come out with this finding. I myself am surprised that this continues to be so, to be determined as so high impact and so feasible for so many experts. I think that the reason why people find it surprising is what I hinted at in my presentation, which is that people think that what this means is that a single deepfake would convince populations. So for example, you have President Biden who says, my finger is on the nuclear button, and they think that that is what we're kind of talking about. But I think actually, when we talk about AI for information operations, what we're actually talking about is the sustained and kind of ceaseless flooding of the information space with information that's both true and false, to the extent that decision makers don't really know what to trust anymore. Maybe they don't even trust their own intelligence sources anymore, because they anticipate that there could be deepfakes within that intelligence as well, which, true or not, would have serious implications for strategic stability. And yeah, just this general point of people not knowing which narratives they can trust, people having their threat perceptions changed. You know, some of the experts talked about how decision makers are much more susceptible to intrusion than some of these actual systems are. So that was kind of an interesting finding. And if you'd like to hear more about the kind of interesting qualitative remarks that experts put forward, you can read them in the report. I can circulate the report afterwards, and there's a whole annex that talks about each of these technologies specifically, and I think it's really interesting. The last thing I'll say on this is that the same technology is used for offensive kind of purposes and defensive ones. So AI for information operations also contains the ability for countermeasures and detection. And so as the technology progresses and deepfakes become more convincing, so too will the detection measures. And I think that's a really important point we heard earlier about measures and countermeasures being equally important. And if I may, I just wanted to come in on the last question that was put to Mr. George Moore, and just say that international humanitarian law, people love to say, does encapsulate emerging technologies because of some of the things that we talked about, for example, their impact on principles like proportionality and discrimination. And so we can actually, in some ways, use the same tools that we have and apply them to new capabilities as well. Thank you.
Thank you. Now we'll have the next set of questions, please. Yes, the lady, sir.
Good afternoon to the speakers. My question is for Dr. George. Dr. George has mentioned in his presentation that drones are working.
Could you please get the mic close?
My question is for Dr. George. Dr. George has mentioned in his presentation that drones are working on differentiation factor between the civilian targets and the military targets. But there is one aspect in case of anti-terrorism war, because the defined targets between civilian targets and the military targets are not there. There might be a house on which in the upper story civilians would be living, and in the down story or the ground floor the terrorists would be operating in an ambiguous way. Now obviously technology is not advanced enough that it would differentiate between the civilian and the terrorist, and because of that factor we have lost many civilian life in Afghanistan. So what technological advancements or what factors there could be improved in the drone facility that could also include the social factor that this one is a civilian and this one is a terrorist? Thank you.
Thank you. Sir.
Yes, I mean, that's the problem with collateral damage. And I don't know that there's a technology.
Dr. Moore, just could you please hold for a while? We'll have 3 questions and then we'll take the answers.
Hello. My question is somewhat of a tactical nature. I saw a video clip the other day in which the American Javelin anti-tank missile played havoc, unprecedented lethality and accuracy against the Russian tanks. Now, unless this video clip was doctored, a phenomenon very clearly obvious in Pakistan nowadays. So, do you think that the tanks are destined for oblivion in the not too distant future?
I'll take one more question, please. Yes, please.
Sir, Ali Jaber, Environmental and Defense Journalist from APP. I had a general question to the speakers. Do you think this emerging technologies trend is a revolution and that will undermine the conventional capabilities or the nuclear capabilities of the states in the South Asia region? And if it is, then is there any collaboration around the world among, like in the US and NATO countries, that working out to promote, to adopt and build capacities to embrace these emerging technologies like AI, cyberspace? And if it is, then can it be replicated in South Asia as well to maintain balance of power? Thank you.
Okay, I'll now request Dr. Moore to answer the first question, please.
Yes, this is a question about how good is, or can we make a technology good enough to discriminate against civilian targets and reduce collateral damage. I don't know how other countries operate their drones. I know that in our system, when the military is controlling, and we have two, I wouldn't say two systems, but in certain areas of the world, drone operations, lethal drone strikes are controlled by Central Intelligence Agency. In others, it's controlled by the military. In the military-controlled operations, there are rules of engagement, and there's an on-staff judge advocate general, that's an attorney, involved in the decision-making chain. Now, at some point, I suppose, and this is conjecture on my part, there is a decision made when the target has not separated sufficiently, or they cannot find the target separated sufficiently to carry out a drone strike without injuring civilians, that an assessment is made as to what the value of that target is. In other words, what the feeling is as to the necessity of taking out that target and accepting the consequences of the collateral damage. That's a very cruel decision to make, but that's a decision that I believe is made in most military operations. But I don't know that there will be, when you add certain things to the system, better sensors give you better discrimination, but right now, the discrimination from the Reaper platform, they can distinguish what types of weapons a person is carrying. Now, it becomes very problematic if they see a gathering, for example, of in an area where there's a lot of terrorist activity. If they see a gathering of people with some weapons and they're of an age group or look like they could be terrorists, that's a decision someone has to approve in order to strike. I do know that, and this is one of the things I mentioned about some of these operators getting PTSD, they begin to kind of live with the families of some of these targets, waiting for them to get separated enough to carry out a strike. And that's a very heavy burden on people. Maybe less so than someone flying an attack aircraft, going in and releasing it on a target and then, leaving the area. So I don't know that there's a technological fix. Better integration of intelligence, better integration of sensors, various types, may improve the situation somewhat, but the cruel fact is that at some point those kind of casualties are going to happen when you do this sort of striking, whether you do it with manned aircraft, drones, artillery projectiles, whatever you do it with. Now, I would contrast that, and I don't mean to contrast that just because of who's involved. I think what we're seeing in Ukraine, in the recent offensive by the Russians, or I should say recent missile strikes by the Russians is just, this is like V2 launches and V1 launches by Nazi Germany in the Second War. They're just putting them into an area and with no regard as to what the target is, either because they can't discriminate enough given their technology, or they just don't care.
Thank you. The next question, maybe I'll request again George Moore to answer. That looking at the accuracy of the Javelin anti-tank missiles against the Russian tanks, are the tanks destined for oblivion in the near future, or will they find some antidote?
I think it was mentioned earlier by the person who did the introductory, the general who did the introduction, that there's always a back and forth. I mean, for Javelin is apparently getting around.
Will you please open the door for me? I left my key inside. Thank you.
Okay, I'm sorry, I can't do anything about someone's key, but
Thank you. Really
you know,
appreciate
the issue with the Javelin, you know, first tanks developed anti-armor.
Right.
These are the kinds of things which are going to change doctrine. You know, in a move that has been severely criticized.
Maid is here. That's okay. That's okay. Yeah. Okay.
Severely criticized. Our Marine Corps is apparently getting rid of tanks. I wouldn't want to be in a Russian tank anywhere in the Ukraine right now. They've shown a number of some of their more modern ones. Apparently, the ammunition storage around the turret makes them particularly vulnerable. You see the turret pop off in a big explosion. So, I mean, this is not. There'll be an evolution. There'll be a counter. In many instances, some of the problems that the Russians had and still continue to have is they don't seem to be deploying ground troops in front of their tanks, or they either can't do that or they won't do that. Tanks can't operate by themselves. They're too subject to any kind of shoulder-fired missile. They need infantry out to take out those people who would come up and injure them. You know, even with putting an explosive charge on the side of the hull. So in the beginning of the war, it just seemed that the Russians were just riding around in their armored vehicles and in their tanks, and they were just taking hits from a number of sources. Now they're also getting bombardment from the switchblades and the artillery, and you've seen the tanks putting up cages on top because the top of the turret is more vulnerable because it doesn't have the anti-active armor that the sides of the tank have. So you'll see development of counter weapons or counter weapon strategies. I don't think tanks will go away totally, but their tactics may change.
Thank you. Our next question will be, since it's more pertinent to South Asian region, I'll request Senior Colonel Yang Jun to respond to this question. Is there any possibility of a collaboration between the technology developing countries to bring balance of power, especially in the South Asian region? Senior Colonel Yang Jun. Colonel Yang, we cannot hear you, please. आप देखें कर्नल यांग का म्यूट तो नहीं किया हुआ आप लोगों ने?
Here's my personal views. To answer this question,
再重申一下个人观点，一个就是说技术依赖国家，你就不能把这个武器放在一个篮子里头，就是比如都是用一个国家的，是吧？这个系统装备，这样的话，如果到战争起来的话，有些国家对你进行，是吧？封锁也好，还是制裁也好，然后就会使你的整个的武器系统瘫痪。
So here are my personal views. First of all, for the technologically dependent countries, my first advice is do not put all your technologies into one basket. And by that, I mean do not rely on the equipment and weapon resources only from one particular country. Because if in the extreme case of a war, when a country seeks to block or to sanction you, then that would be easy for it to put your whole weaponry system into paralysis.
但是呢，三军指挥这种体系要统一，你不能够陆军用 A 国的，是吧？海军用 B 国的，是吧？这个空军用 C 国的。
But for the command and control systems, I think the technologies will have to be coordinated for the three services. You can't have the technology from A country used for Air Force and the technologies from B countries to be used for navies. That's not likely to fly.
这样的话，这就会，如果是出现这种情况，那么就会使整个的三军的话联合行动受到很大的这种的限制，或者这种阻碍。
If that happens, that means if you use different technologies for different services, that would create a lot of constraints for coordinated operations between the services.
我们知道现在作战的话有一个无形的环，这个程序有一个无形的环，就是发现、识别、决策、打击。
We know that there's this loop in the war that is discovery, detection, decision making, and strike.
那么谁作战双方、敌对双方谁先完成这个环，谁就有可能是吧？作为这个胜者。
Whoever finishes this loop, I mean between the two rivaling parties, is likely to be the winner of this war.
所以我说这个指挥系统一定要高效，然后要统一，不能够是吧？各军种之间还需要再翻译，啊，迟滞这个作战的行动，迟滞这个决策的这个过程。
That's why I mean that for the commanding and control systems, the technologies need to be highly efficient. They need to be unified in order not to create any delay in terms of decision making.
Thank you. Now, ladies and gentlemen, we'll have last two questions. Okay, please. No, on the right. Yeah.
Hello. My name is Faraz. I'm a research associate at Air University. And the question is to the whole panel. How do you think AI enhanced military systems or emerging technologies in general, if they're incorporated into the military systems in South Asia, how will that impact the...
Could you please get your mic a little closer?
Is it better now? Okay. So how will AI enhanced systems in the military of India and Pakistan will affect the deterrence relation in South Asia? Thank you.
Can you repeat your question, please?
How will AI enhance military systems, so that can be any military system, UUVs, UAVs, and so on? How will those systems affect the deterrence relation in South Asia, specifically India and Pakistan?
Okay, one more question. Just the lady here.
Okay, so this is Dr. Aisha Nazuk. I'm from Nash University. My question is generic. I would like to ask that we don't have our internet backbone, right? So this, in a way, this has been already asked, but I would like to add another dimension into this question. We don't have our internet backbone, so if we rely on the technologies, even if we diversify the portfolio, and what is the guarantee that the countries that we are collaborating with, they will, hold, or they will be accountable under the global administrative law that is relevant. So that is a prime concern. I would like to quote one example. If you take from like in the Russia and Ukraine war, most of the European economies, they are switching back to coal, no matter they sign a lot of treaties to use green energy, sustainable energy resources. So don't you think that puts an additional vulnerability on a country like Pakistan?
Thank you. Okay, I think we'll take the second question first, and I'll direct this question to Ms. Marina, that in case there's all these technologies are dependent on the internet bandwidth and its availability. So what is the guarantee that the internet bandwidth would be available to every country during a crisis situation, and how or doesn't it put an additional burden on these countries? Because citing the Russia-Ukraine example, the Russians were under sanctions and a lot of things were stopped for them. So could you please answer, Ms. Marina?
Yeah, I agree. It's a really good question. I don't think that I have the answer necessarily. I think another thing that it made me think about was Starlink, obviously, which is the SpaceX-owned mega satellite constellation, came in, and after Ukrainian internet provision was denied by Russia, they came in and provided internet coverage to Ukraine. However, I have seen that just this week, the news is that Starlink will not be continuing to provide internet access for Ukraine. And so that additionally shows you how when we involve private sector actors in this game of providing critical national infrastructure, the kind of source isn't as reliable. And I think that the same thing exists perhaps in Pakistan, where you're talking about this internet infrastructure is not strong, and who might come in to fill that gap. It might be private sector companies, but what responsibilities do these private sector companies have to a state and the kind of ability of a state to flourish and provide these security benefits? I think that it's much less than if it were owned by governments, and there aren't the same mechanisms for holding those actors accountable. So I haven't answered your question. I've only further complicated it, but I agree it's a really good one, and I agree it is something that we need to be increasingly aware about with these new actors entering the space and thinking about what responsibilities do they have to populations. Thank you.
Thank you. The question which was asked earlier, I'll direct that to Dr. Moo, that with the AI and other technologies, their capabilities to enhance military systems, what kind of effects they'll have on the strategic stability, specifically in South Asian region?
That's extremely hard to predict. Certainly, if the AI creates an imbalance, an extreme imbalance on one side or the other, that there will be some overall deterrent consequences for that. Personally, although I think that AI on the small scale will create more effective weapons, and that will be a game changer, I think that some of the things that have been mentioned about AI in terms of cyber warfare are maybe more important than, for example, improving the autonomy of a missile system or anti-tank system. I think on the large scale AI, in terms of cyber, in terms of I think there's a concern that if we don't understand exactly what AI does in a system, implementing it in strategic systems could be a severely disruptive and dangerous implementation. So I think that's maybe all I can say on that at this point.
Thank you very much. This brings us to the end of the session 3. And I, on behalf of Team CAS and all the participants of GSTAR 2022, would like to thank all the speakers, Lieutenant General Khalid Ahmed Kidwai, Sir Colonel Yang John, Dr. George Malcolm Moog, and Ms. Marina Favero for taking their time out and enlightening us on these important subjects. I'll request the audience for a big hand for the 4 speakers. Over to Ms. Khansa, please.
Thank you, sir. I would like to extend profound gratitude of our entire team to our esteemed speakers who couldn't join us in person but have delivered extremely interesting and engaging presentations on their respective topics. Before moving forward, I would request President CAS to deliver a token of thanks to Squadron Leader Ghani Akbar for joining us today. Sir. Thank you so much, sir. And now I would request the audience to have, we are now having a small prayer and lunch break, but our second session, which is aerospace, our 4th session, but second session of today, which is aerospace security, determinants and future prospects, will start at 1400 hours. So for now, you're all requested to proceed for the lunch, but you're all requested to be back on time, please. Thank you.